Hi friends, Krista here. Thank you so much for stopping by Books and Jams. I am here today to talk about the rest of the books that I read in the month of September. I know, I'm a little late. It's already over a week into October, but I have a stack here that's begging to be put away, but I need to talk about them before I can put them away. I had a great reading month in the month of September. I believe all in all, I read 15 books, and I already talked about 10 of them at the beginning of the month in my mid-month wrap up. I haven't put those yet away, and I had a couple others from the library as well. So some of the ones I talked about in that mid-month wrap up, just in case you want to go check it out. I read 2 more in the Secret Book and Scone Society. I read The Whispered Word and The Book of Candlelight. I read the first book in the Flavia de Luce series, The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley. 2 middle grade series that I started were the Chronicles of Prydain, the first one of which is The Book of Three by Lloyd Alexander. And I started Gregor the Overlander by Suzanne Collins. Both of those were a lot of fun. And then 2 kind of rom-com type books. I read 500 Miles from You by Jenny Colgan, which completed a trilogy. And then I read To Love and to Loathe by Martha Waters, which is actually the second in a trilogy, which I didn't realize when I listened to that one. So if you're interested in my thoughts on any of those, as well as a few others, go ahead and click on the link below for my mid-month wrap up to find a little bit more detail about those. But I do have 5 more books to talk about, one of which is not a part of a series, and it's the only book I read in September that's not a part of a series. Series September was a humongous success for me, although I did probably start more than I completed, but that's okay. I'm going to start off today with one that I forgot to mention that I listened to right at the very beginning of September, and I flew through it in a day or two before I even went home to my mom's house. But because I read it so quickly and I listened to it on audio and I didn't have a physical copy of the book, I forgot that I had read it. But I don't want to forget to talk about it because it was so lovely. The book that I'm speaking of is Miss Bunkle's Book by D.E. Stevenson. This is a book that was not on my radar. I actually never would have picked this up if it weren't for my patrons. Every month I give some of my patrons an opportunity to recommend a book for me. I put all their recommendations in a cup and I pull one out, and Miss Bunkle's Book is one of the books that I've picked out recently. I think it was August that I picked it out, but I read it right at the beginning of September. This book, my friends, this book was a delight. It was so much fun. Looking at the cover, I probably would have picked this up off the shelves. It is not a book that calls to me just by its cover alone. However, it was such a fun story. So Maria, thank you for recommending me this book. In this book, we follow Miss Bunkle. She is a 30-something single woman living in this small town where everybody knows everybody. Everybody kind of gets into everybody's business, and we do get to know a lot of the characters in the town. But Miss Bunkle writes a book one day. Miss Bunkle's a little bit struggling for finances, writes a book about the people in her town changing their names only. It is a huge hit with her editor. When he reads it the first time, he can't put it down. He reads it through basically in one sitting, stays up all night to read it. Can't decide if it's satirical or if the author is just very innocent and doesn't realize the gem of a book that she just wrote. Miss Bunkle gets called into the editor. She does write under a pen name. So this book gets published and released, and the people in the town are reading all about it and realizing little by little that it's their town and it's about them. And it in a way, she kind of opens up people's deepest desires. Things start happening in town to line up with the story that she wrote in the book, using the people in the town as her characters. So it just was, I don't know how else to describe it other than to say it was a delight. I laughed out loud. I grew fond of Miss Bunkle and many of these other characters in the book. I loved the story and where it went, and I learned that it's the first in a series. I am not chomping at the bit to get to the next book. I think it stands on its own 2 feet as just a standalone book. I am just still so glad that I read it. I thought it was fun. Great palate cleanser, lighthearted, heartwarming, just hope-filled, just a delight. It was just a delight. Also a delight is returning to the Vanderbeeker series. This book is book 5, Make-A-Wish. And this was given to me. I talked about it in a haul. There was no name on it. It just says a gift for you. I have since learned that this is from Maria, who also told me about Miss Bunkle's book. So Maria, thank you for sending this to me. I love this series. I love this family. Each book in the Vanderbeeker series follows the Vanderbeeker family. There are 5 children. They get along so well. They each have their different personalities and quirks and interests and passions, but they get along so well as a family. I love the mom and dad. I love it all. In this one, the son is at the beginning planning a huge camping trip with his dad, is really, really looking forward to it. But then his dad's best friend from college calls because I think one of his parents has passed away or something along those lines. And the dad cannot go on the camping trip with his son because he has to go to the funeral with his best friend and it's far away. And the son is totally devastated. Oh, and the grandparents show up and they don't have a very close relationship with the kids. So that causes some drama, but it just is a delight to spend time with his family. I just learned that book 6 came out in September. Somehow I missed that. It flew under my radar. So I am going to be looking forward to finding book 6 as well. But I love this family. I love the series. They're just very, very heartwarming. Another middle grade series that I really enjoy is Pages & Co. This is book 3, The Map of Stories. I think in my TBR I said it was book 4. It's only 3. I do have book 4, which I think is called the book Smugglers. And I believe book 5 is out or coming out soon. This is by Anna James. In book 1, Tilly and her friend Oscar discover that they are book wanderers, just like Tilly's grandparents. And they have this ability to travel into books. And then they learn about this whole secret society almost of people who are book wanderers and who protect books and all of that. And it's called the Underlibrary, I believe. And there are now some bad people in charge of the Underlibrary in England. And Tilly and Oscar are threatened by them, like literally threatened. They have threatened Tilly and Oscar to stop wandering through books. And they're trying to find a way to have immortality using the power of this magic of book wandering and thinking that children have a stronger magic and they want to basically steal their magic. Anyways, this one involves traveling to the Library of Congress in the United States and trying to get help from a different underlibrary and traveling through books. And it's just continuing on the story that started in the first 2 books and also was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that series very much. I think I did listen to this one, but it is a fun one to read along with or skim through because there are just some really fun illustrations throughout that add a lot to the story. I would recommend reading it in print or pairing it with the audio. The audio is great as well. The last series book that I read in September was the 3rd book. I don't know the name of this series, but Sonali Dev is writing this series where she takes an Austen book and gives it an Indian American spin. And this one, Incense and Sensibility, is obviously a spin off of Sense and Sensibility. And I will say that the first one, Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, I absolutely loved. The second one, Recipe for Persuasion, I enjoyed mainly because Persuasion is my favorite Austen. This one was okay. Like, I feel like it's kind of my 3rd in enjoyment. It's the 3rd in the series. It was okay. I think they do need to be read in order because although you follow different characters in each book, there is kind of a backstory that would be a little more confusing if you weren't familiar with the other 2, or characters that are also a part of this one that you get to know because of the first 2 books. So I would say to read them in order, even though they are companions, really. In this one, we follow Yash, who is a politician. He has been fake dating his longtime friend, and it is starting to grate on his nerves that he's basically lying to his constituency, and he's just under a lot of stress. India Dashwood is best friends with his sister, and she's a yoga instructor, does a little bit of counseling as well, just kind of like holistic counseling type of stuff through her yoga practice. And the sister recommends Yash to go see her. they had an incident in college and like a moment where they really connected, but then never followed through on it. He felt the pressures of life and expectations from his family and didn't feel like he could follow through with that connection when he was younger. And now they're coming back in contact with each other and sparks fly, obviously. Yeah, it was a good story. I enjoyed it. There is a bit of language. For some reason, this one is just okay for me and not as big of a hit as the first book was. And then the last book that I'm going to talk about today was my Patreon book club book for the month of September. And we read The Gown by Jennifer Robson, which very appropriately, we got to read the month that Queen Elizabeth passed away. So it was very cool to kind of reflect on this almost beginning of her life as queen, or even before. I think she was still a princess when she married Philip. It was very cool to read this in the month where there was just a lot of news about the royal family and stuff. So, but in this one, we're not really following the queen or the princess at the time all that much. We're following the young women, the everyday workers who were the embroiderers on her gown. And her gown is known for its extensive and elaborate embroidery work that was done on it. And so it was very cool to kind of get a behind the scenes look at Hartwell's, the designer who designed the gown, and the workroom where all of these embroiderers worked. We follow in particular two women, Anne and Miriam. Anne lost her brother during the war. This is just after World War II ended. Anne lost her brother during the Blitz, is living with her sister-in-law at the very beginning of this book. The sister-in-law decides to move to Canada where her family is from, and Anne is desperate to find a new roommate so she doesn't have to lose her house, her home. And then Miriam comes over from France to work at Hartwell's, and Anne and Miriam begin to be roommates and then close friends throughout the story. And I really loved learning about Anne and Miriam. But then we also have a timeline of 2016 where Heather is a young woman living in Canada, and her mother sends her some embroidered flowers that belonged to her grandmother. And Heather is just very curious about where these come from. Her grandmother was not known for her embroidery, and she just begins to do some research about these flowers and where do they come from. She notices that they look similar to the work done on the gown, the wedding gown, and just learns a lot more about her grandmother that she didn't know before. So I, as per usual, I kind of preferred the past storyline a little more than the present day storyline, but I did still really like the direction that the present day storyline went in. I was crying by page 28 and I cried multiple times throughout this book. I thought Jennifer Robson did a wonderful job with these characters and developing them and giving them their own stories. There is a scene in here, and I had never heard this, or it didn't compute with me when other people talked about this book, but there is a scene of sexual assault in here, and it was difficult to read. Very, very difficult to read. It was graphic enough that it was disturbing to read. And I don't remember other people talking about that, so I wanted to be sure to say that because I know it took some of my patrons by surprise because we just were not expecting that. So content warning for a sexual assault in this book. But yeah, I ended up giving this 5 stars. I loved it. I loved it. And I'm very excited because Jennifer Robson is one of the 3 or 4 authors that I wanted to try out this year, and now I have, and I really loved it. So that is it for the end of September. It was a little bit slower than the first part of the month, but that's because I did not have a 9-hour drive home to my mom's and hours upon hours while I was there while my mom and sister were working. At the beginning of the month, I just had a lot more time, and towards the end of the month is when I had my trip to Wisconsin with the BookTube besties and got to go meet some of my BookTube friends in person again for the 2nd year in a row, and it was wonderful. And some of my lovely subscribers as well, which was so much fun. It just was such a fun trip, but definitely didn't get a lot of reading done during that trip. So series September was a fabulous month for me overall. As far as the bingo card goes, I kind of didn't pay attention to it. I created it with Sarah for everyone to use during Series September, and then I didn't even use it myself. But looking at all of these books, I think the only one that I did not get, as far as I know, was an adaptation. Now you can watch it was one of the prompts, and I don't think I read anything that has been adapted into a movie or a show, as far as I know. If I mentioned anything that was a movie or a show, let me know. I would love to chat with you down in the comments below. How did Series September go for you? Did you read one series book? Did you read a whole bunch? Or none at all? What was your favorite book that you read in the month of September? Or let's talk about any of these books that I talked about here today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you spending time with me, and I look forward to talking with you in another video very soon. Bye!